All right, welcome back, folks. My name is Dave, and this is Politically Homeless, the channel that just can't make up its mind because you know what, folks? It's times are difficult, okay? And I have a special guest on today. And the reason I can't make up my mind if I want to be on the left or the right or just do I think labels really matter these days? I have a great guest on who's going to explain about the organization No Labels. And I tell you what, I think they're on to something. Holly Page is here, and she's a national co-chair for No Labels. So this is a big deal for me. Holly, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me this morning.
You're welcome. I hear it's your first time on YouTube.
Very
It's
excited.
yeah, it's a fun place to be sometimes. So Holly, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got involved in No Labels, and what is No Labels trying to do. All right, I know those are three big
Yeah.
items, but do your best.
Okay. So I'm a native of California. I got a job with Bill Clinton's first presidential campaign because no one wanted it. No one thought he could win. And obviously ended up in Little Rock on election night and back in Washington, where my first boss when I arrived in Washington was Nancy Jacobson. She had been the third person Bill Clinton hired when he decided to run for president, really saw what was possible with his message. And for the next 10 years, Nancy and I really spent our professional life working to advance what I would call the politics of Bill Clinton, New Democrats in various forms. And then in about 2010, Nancy had been strategic advisors to Senator Joe Lieberman and Senator Evan Bayh, saw them really chased out of government because they were unwilling to go with the trend of an ever increasing partisan polarization strategy, and decided to do something about it. She started No Labels. There's no analogous organization. There was no roadmap. It's not like we could say, oh, well, 50 years ago, so-and-so did this and we should do X, Y, and Z. So she is an innovator and she's incredibly agile, and she just started to do stuff. Eventually, we formed allies in the United States House of Representatives. We brought together Josh Gottheimer, a Democrat, with Tom Reed, a Republican. They started a coffee support group for members who couldn't believe how dysfunctional the place was and invited other colleagues. Initially, that members who joined that informal meeting wouldn't even put their names on a piece of paper as having attended a meeting with somebody of the opposite party. That's how polarizing and what the retribution is like in the House. But we persisted and prevailed. And today, that is a standing caucus of the United States House, the Problem Solvers Caucus, 64 members. They're governed by their own rules, and they have played a key role in all of the successful bipartisan legislation of the past 6-8 years. And I will say, we've given up on trying to define this politics, centrist, moderate. Those words are not worth the fight of trying to define them. This really is the politics of problem solving. And the beauty of that is, if you are liberal or conservative, you are welcome at this table to try to help move the country forward. So we have the Senate, we have the House caucus, we have Senate allies, little different culture. We didn't, they didn't form a gang this time, thankfully. And interestingly, we, about 5 months before COVID, we brought the House and the Senate together for a standing working meeting. Had never really been done before. The first meetings were like junior high school dances. Everybody's in their own corner. But then COVID hit. And that meeting became every single day on Zoom for 3 solid weeks. And what happened was they understood that their power was so much greater if they came together. Nancy, being Nancy, who's a tough taskmaster, said to them, all right, but that was COVID. What else do you have? So they actually went at Governor Hogan's invitation to Annapolis for a retreat. Our House caucus, Senate allies, and he brought in some governors. And it was there that they created the framework for the hard infrastructure package, and importantly, found the offsets to pay for it. As we know, the White House, the House, and the Senate wanted Build Back Better. So the Democratic idea was to combine the two bills. Because our House allies were speaking to our Senate allies, Josh Gottheimer led 9 Democrats in a very courageous procedural battle to just simply get the bills separated so that the members could vote on them separately. Goes to the Senate, 17 Republicans voted for that bill, Mitch McConnell and Bernie Sanders. Comes back to the House. Now the squad won't support it because it doesn't have Build Back Better. And then Minority Leader McCarthy and former President Trump were whipping against it because they didn't want to give the Biden White House the win. Again, our forces stepped up. 13 Republicans defied their party and voted for that bill. Out of the 22 members of the House who defied their party to give the country much needed investment in roads, bridges, water pipes, and rural infrastructure, 10 did not return to the next Congress because the incentives in Washington reward the wrong things. They reward adherence to party loyalty. They reward extremism and ever increasingly outrageousness. You know, you do something crazy, you break through online, you get a lot of online money. We at No Labels challenge those reward systems. We're trying to show the political marketplace that there is the political establishment, that there's a market for this politics, that there are voters, citizen activists, donors who will support it. That really is the fundamental driving core of No Labels.
Yeah. Well, it really sounds like you've invested a lot of thought into this. The polling numbers are very intriguing. Yesterday, you guys put out the top 3 issues that Americans care most about. And I think even if you're on the right or maybe on the left, depending on what you define yourself as, you've got to look at those 3 issues and say, yes, when someone says inflation and the cost of things, which is skyrocketed in the last 3 years, to the point where, I mean, your grocery bill in some cases has doubled. And I have a family, and I don't shop at really fancy stores most of the time. I shop at Walmart. I try to actually go to places where I can save money. But even at those more discounted places, Holly, I've seen prices that I've never seen for things. And I'm wondering, how do we reverse this trend? I mean, yes, Americans care about this. What would be the plan moving forward to try to reduce inflation? I know President Biden had his quote unquote Inflation Reduction Act. I don't think it worked. I'm just being honest. So how do we rein inflation in? Because that's the top issue. And then there are 2 other really important issues: immigration, which I think the immigration system has been broken for a very long time, but now we're seeing unprecedented numbers of people crossing the border, and we've got somebody who's in charge of this telling us that the border is secure, which is ridiculous, and most Americans see this. But this plays again to the extreme elements of both political parties. In this case, it's the left saying, "Hey, everything's great," and it's not. I mean, you've got a lot of work to do when it comes to competing with the messaging that if you turn on MSNBC, you'll get a message. If you turn on Fox, you'll get a message. All day long, you'll get those messages. And you log on to your computer. I have a page and you've got all these news stories. And it's always perplexing how, like you said, it typically highlights the most extreme thing. And they're monetizing that extreme thing that they're trying to tell you to click on this or watch this. And I'm saying to myself, how do those prices go down? How do we stop printing money as a country where now we're raising interest rates? I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, but this is the kind of stuff I talk about on my little channel here. Like, I'm amazed at how many people just are okay with sending, okay, and this might be controversial, but we've got now two wars that we're involved in, two named or big name wars. We've been involved with wars for, for decades, essentially, and on a smaller level, and people don't really talk or hear much about it. But Nikki Haley, I'll just use her as an example. She said during a recent debate that we can do both. We can continue to fund everything we need to do here, and we can fight endless wars overseas. I'm wondering how No Labels looks at foreign policy and our constant need, it seems, to be involved. And yes, I am not an isolationist, but I think a lot of Americans are growing tired of that approach. What say you?
What I would say about that is, part of what No Labels is about is the maturing of the American voter. We are all collectively exhausted by being made promises. Just elect this one and it'll all be fixed. Elect that one, it will all be fixed. The problems and challenges we're facing are complicated. There's no easy answer to many of them. A few, there's an easy answer. And it requires collaborative effort and deliberation. And so this is less about No Label showing up and saying, this is how we're going to fix immigration, and this is how we're going to fix, the challenges AI are going to introduce to our economic structure, which are enormous, by the way. It's about saying no one solely owns the truth or all the answers. It's a big country, and our ability to move forward is depending on us coming together. And what we published earlier this year, the Common Sense Policy Handbook, is really an anomaly for Washington, because normally what happens in Washington are smart people get in a room, they say, we think we should do blah, 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 and they put it out into the political bloodstream. And we didn't do that. We went back through our research, through research of supporters and strategic allies of No Labels, and we looked over 10, 12, in some cases 20 years of research, and found positions where the American people could find consensus on the toughest issues: abortion, guns, immigration. The truth is that I don't believe the American people are as divided as we are told we are. People profit off of our division. The reason why our politics is broken is because too many people profit off of it. It works for them. What this is about is this is a rebellion. This is about giving finally an opening for the common sense majority to have their voices heard, and to say, we are going to hold you accountable. We are going to reward doing the tough work and coming up with the tough solutions. All the easy stuff has been done, all the low-hanging fruit done. Right now, we're going to get to some tough things in our society and in our country. And we have to have leaders who will put the country over their short-term political interests and those of their party. The sad thing is that we even have to have an organization that will do it. But that's where we are.
Yeah. Now, there are people probably who are going to be watching this who are going to say, well, No Labels, they're going to bring in the establishment. I hear this a lot. The establishment, you're going to have an establishment Republican or an establishment Democrat, and they're going to get together and they're going to be all moderate and kumbaya, and they're going to still be part of what some in politics call the Washington swamp, right? I mean, you remember Drain the Swamp, right? And the swamp itself didn't get drained. I think what happened was the swamp drained President Trump, or the swamp drains whoever's trying to drain it. So why would this be different? I'm not trying to be,
no, I get it. It's a fair enough question.
Yeah.
Listen, first of all, the swamp is viciously attacking No Labels every chance they get right now.
That's true. That's true.
We're the enemy of the swamp. So that should give folks with that concern a little bit of comfort. But The answer is that whoever is, so I think what you're alluding to is our 2024 strategy.
Hmm.
And we decided a couple years ago to pursue a strategy of getting on the ballot at the presidential line only. We will by election time of next year be on all 50 ballots. And if the common sense majority continues, as they have done the last year or so, to say they do not want a rematch of 2020. They do not want a choice between Presidents Biden and Trump. They want a new conversation. Then we will have the ballot to offer to a campaign and candidates to run. And the concept is a unity ticket, a Republican and a Democrat running together. And listen, the whole purpose is to challenge the corroded structure of Washington and that incentive structure that I talked about. If we do offer our ballot, and that's all No Labels can do, if we'd offer the ballot, there would have to be an independent campaign, a run that adheres to all the regular FEC laws and everything else. That would be separate. But the whole idea is that campaign, those candidates would not be kind of held responsible for pulling with it the weight of the establishment and structure of Washington. They'd be able to make decisions in the best interest of the collective country, because that is what the people will have elected them to do. And it's a very, to my mind anyway, it's a very clever solution to the problem, because we know people far outside the political spectrum have a very hard time breaking through. I mean, we get compared all the time to a Jill Stein or whatever. First of all, she ran to the left of the Democratic nominee. Of course, she only pulled from one side, but this isn't about that. We're not interested in selling books or getting a cable TV show. We're only interested in helping right course the direction of this great nation, and absolutely challenging the idea that pitting us against each other as Americans is good for an individual's political success.
Yeah, that's well said. I like what you said there. Now we've got a $32 trillion debt, if I'm not mistaken. It might be lower or higher. I know it's over 30. I used to always say $30 trillion, and it just keeps going up. We've had the CARES Act, which blew it up by I think 8 trillion, and then Biden had his spending spree. How do we rein that in? Because I know that's one of your common sense issues. I know you've said that you'd sit down and you'd talk it out, but do we cut the size of government? Do we look at different agencies? Do we just challenge everything? In the sense that we can't just keep doing this, but yet we keep doing this. You know what I mean?
Yes, well, I believe that there's an enormous opportunity to reinvent government, to steal an old Bill Clinton line. The truth is, we're trying to govern a 21st century society and economy on a 20th century structure. Okay. Immigration, last time it was reformed 1986, before widespread use of fax machines. Like, there's a lot that's happened since then that can help us expedite and fine tune that system to allow us to bring the best and the brightest and the hardest working wannabe Americans in and keep bad people out. But so I think there's a lot to be had there. But I will tell you this, what is missing is a political mandate. Okay. And think back to Ross Perot in 1992. He hammered a balanced budget every single week. For those of your watchers who are way too young, there was this cable TV show. He'd go on every single week and he hammered it. And he created a political mandate for balancing the budget. He forced it on the political establishment. Okay. That is a very real kind of outcome of what our efforts are, that we collectively harness the voice of our voters. We believe there's at least 77 million mainstream common sense majority voters, and we hammer it. And we also stick with the process because there are tough decisions to be made. There are tough choices. Eventually, a politician in Washington is going to have to tell the American people, you can't eat ice cream all day long and not get fat,
Yeah.
right? And so we have to stay with them, reward them, encourage them, support them, you know. So this is not a process that ends should a unity ticket get elected. That's only the beginning. The truth is, Plato said, engage in politics or be governed by those who do. And the problem is, so many Americans who are busy, like you, raising families, trying to find the best price on eggs, like I do, you
Yeah.
know, trying to make our way in this economy, are not engaging. And meanwhile, extremists, people with single issue agendas, and people with good intentions. I'm not saying everybody who engages, you know, is bad. They're just skewing the system. They're just skewing where the attention goes. We have to, as the common sense majority, come together and make our voice heard and say, we have got to get our fiscal house in order. It is irresponsible. It is jeopardizing our future, and we've had enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, being that this is your first time on YouTube, right? I'm thinking to
Mhm.
myself as you're talking to me that I'm hoping as time gets more of the essence, as we get closer to the primaries and some of the things that are going to determine whether or not No Labels puts forth a unity ticket, that media will be more open to hearing this. Are you finding any success with other media outlets, maybe more mainstream outlets? I know everybody's got their tribe that they minister to, right? It's the Fox tribe or the CNN tribe, and breaking through, getting that message out in a way. And you're very articulate, so
Thank you.
folks like yourself who can kind of break through the noise. I mean, there's a lot of kind of glamorous stuff that goes on in politics, and it's real glossy and sexy, and people want to, they tend to now gravitate toward a charismatic messenger. And I'm not referring to any one person, but there is somebody who's running again for president, and one of his attributes is that he's this great showman, salesperson, insulter in chief, however you want to look at it. And the people who love that stuff, they tend to ignore some of the nuts and bolts, some of the real big issues here, whether it's immigration or inflation, your top three. And I'm thinking, how do you break through the noise? How do you, there are like channels, there are even independent channels on other platforms that are just devoted 24/7 to this. And I don't have the money or the time, quite frankly, to do a 24/7 network devoted to the common sense majority. But what's the marketing and media strategy moving forward, Holly?
So the mainstream media, as we know, loves a fight. So they love the idea that the Democrats have come out swinging at us, and there's a lot of coverage of that. If there is a unity ticket and the No Labels ballot is offered to that ticket, they are going to love the conflict that brings to the structure. So far what we're talking about, I believe, with Cornel West and even Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are in many ways placeholders for something different. But I think if our unity ticket concept does launch and has serious people who are viable to be commander in chief on day one, I think that the media will love that disruption. Having said that, the media industry is in free fall because more and more Americans are not getting their information there. They are exhausted by the tone and the tenor of the channels that you mentioned, and they're looking elsewhere. We know, you and I discussed, my children, I have a 19-year-old who's very interested in politics. He never watches the news. He gets all of his information on YouTube and other, online sources. So I would ask you and anybody listening to this, you tell us, how can we use the next generation of media to have this conversation. This is a rebellion, and it is about American citizens understanding they cannot outsource the responsibility of their government. They have to be involved. And these politicians, even the good ones, okay, cannot save us. They cannot save us. We have to save them and ourselves. That's the truth of it. And, you know, I go around everywhere and people are, well, what about this reform, that reform? All good, worthy things to try, but there's no substitution for good old fashioned paying attention, getting involved. I'll tell you one other thing that I think is really important. The truth about money and politics, which is a, you know, sticky subject, is that it's not that there's too much, there's not enough. Okay. If you go to opensecrets.com, it has the list of every federal contribution to every candidate. And you will see that in 2020, the biggest election of our collective lifetime, less than 1% of all Americans gave $200 or more.
Yeah.
That means every single federal elected official is competing for a pool of about 500,000 people. That's why donors have so much power. There's so few of them. You know, one of the things No Labels does is we like to highlight men and women in the House and Senate who take courageous votes, who take courageous stands, who do what they think is in the right and best interest of the country. And we send out to our membership, because we're a membership-based organization, consider supporting this person. We don't care if you send $1 or $100. The point is not the money for us, because we don't take a penny out of that. We don't take any processing fee. We just say, somebody is, by sending $1, says, I'm paying attention and I like what you're doing and I support you, you know, and we have to, that's part of the maturation process that I'm talking about. We just can't outsource it anymore. It's not working.
Yeah. Now, that's probably a good segue to talking about the funding issue. I've logged on to a few of the No Labels Zoom meetings and watched Ryan and some of his cohorts interact with people, and people seem to have this question. They have two questions. One is, you guys are going to be a spoiler, right? This is the first one, where they're terrified either you're going to help elect Donald Trump again, or you're going to help elect Joe Biden. I've heard some good answers on that, where I think it will probably pull equally from both sides, or maybe even pull from folks who weren't engaged at all, who decided to get involved because there was a legitimate alternative. The other issue I hear a lot about, Holly, is the dark money, the so-called dark money. You know, and where is the money coming from? Is it somebody on Team Trump that's trying to, you know, disrupt everything even more to help, you know, pave a way for his return to the White House? And you know, if you can answer that, it would be good. I understand that you don't have to disclose in certain situations where the money is coming from based on the laws that are currently on the books, but maybe you can address that a little bit.
Sure. We'll start with the money and then we'll go to the spoiler. So remember, all No Labels is doing is getting the ballot access, right? A campaign, should it be launched and executed, will have to comply with all of the rules. But what I say to folks about the money is, first of all, I don't judge you by who your friends are, who you sit with at church, who you know. I judge you on your actions. So I would ask people who are looking at No Labels to do the same. Judge us by what we say and do. We've been absolutely consistent. We have never advocated for individual industry or individual interest. We're pretty clear that our leaders like Senator Joe Lieberman, Dr. Ben Chavis, Joe Cunningham, and others have stated publicly time and time again, they have no interest in being a part of re-electing Donald Trump. So that speaks for itself, right? But the reason why we're not disclosing is those of us who are leading this effort have been attacked in social media, threatened.
Yeah.
Trucks with AI generated pictures of us with Donald Trump have been driven around neighborhoods. Why would we
Wow.
subject people who are only allowing us to exercise our constitutional right to get on the ballot? Why would we subject them to that? The forces trying to maintain the status quo are vicious, right? And they will go to they know no boundaries in trying to destroy and hurt us. So I have no problem not disclosing those donors. And again, judge us by what we say and do. And I have no problem, by the way, with any individual who's ever contributed money to No Labels. So, and that's my integrity on the line, let alone the organization. So I think that speaks for itself. And the source of those charges about dark money take dark money themselves. They're totally hypocritical, which is ridiculous. But anyway, in terms of the spoiler thing, we have no intention again of getting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% of the vote. We've said from day one, we only go if we see a path to victory. The genius of this plan is it has what we call off ramps all along the way. Remember, No Labels controls the ballot, not the campaign. And we have until pretty well into the summer of 2024 to decide if we're going to give that ballot or not. And if we don't see a viable path forward, we don't want to waste our political collective energy. We pull the ballot and we use our collective power some other way, like Ross Perot did on balancing the budget, right? We come together and we make a political imperative around something there is no political will for. So we have no interest in, and in coming in as also ran. But I think people who say that are misreading the moment. The truth is, it is not No Labels that is making President Biden weak and President Trump weak. They have done that themselves. Okay. And if the Democrats, of which I come out of, would spend less time attacking No Labels and the people's right to have a choice about who leads them in their government, and more time talking about the very issues that you have mentioned, inflation, immigration, they would be more successful. They are not connecting with broad swaths of the American people, and they need to spend some time to understand why not, and what do they have to change about their messaging and their policies to change that.
Yeah. Another good answer. One thing that when I was reading the Common Sense platform that you guys put out, the all of the above approach to energy, I think that is an imperative right now. Whether we go to electric vehicles and what the future looks like, you're still going to need a power grid. And
Right.
Currently we just don't have the technology to be 100% green. I hope someday we can do that. I'm not against progress. I'm not against discovering new forms of energy. I'm thinking that technology is really the key here, and advancing technology. But as we do that, it seems as though there are many on the left who talk very strangely, and we're also getting a lot of components for certain products that we're going to be making from our adversaries, from countries that really aren't that concerned about the well-being of everyday Americans. So I noticed again that the No Labels position, which I was very happy to see, was that yes, oil, natural gas. I know that scares a lot of people more on the environmental end of things, but I think that's a good approach, and I think most Americans would agree with you on that. So I applaud No Labels for doing that. Was that intentional, or did you get some folks together and just decide, look, I know the future is probably going to be more green at some point, but right now we're not there? I mean, how did you come to that conclusion?
Again, I know this is a departure from how Washington normally works, but 5 people didn't sit in a room and come up with that. We listened to what the American people were saying. We listened to what the majority of our voters were saying, and they're very clear on it. Yes, they care about the environment. They care about our collective future. But there's a lot of considerations that have to be taken into account. And again, I think it's about, we're being promised things that are not possible by politicians to make short-term gains. And the truth is, and if you talk to anybody who, just as you say, we're not there yet to be completely dependent on renewables. And so that's just the reality of the situation. I think politicians need to understand voters are, wise. I think they're wise. They may not know every detail about every, policy, but they have a very good sense when they're being sold a free lunch.
Yeah.
And they know it's not true. They know, again, you can't eat ice cream all day long and not get fat. And I think it's time for a reckoning, for an honest conversation about some of the choices that have to be made and some of the compromises that have to be made, so we can collectively move forward, honor our commitment to our planet and our environment, going forward, and also take advantage of the amazing resources that this country was blessed with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, hard to disagree with something like that, unless again
but people will.
You're
and that's
wedded.
Okay. By the way, part of this is like groupthink is un-American. Okay, the whole thing started with a bunch of people who didn't agree on anything, but one principle: liberty. It's all that united them. Right. And in fact, the whole government was structured to force compromise, so that no one side or one point of view could run roughshod over everybody else. That's the whole point, because it's a big, diverse nation, and there are people with different points of view, different life experiences, whatever. I honor that. No, I do not think everybody has to view the world exactly like I do, right? Mm-hmm. I just think that we have to, this is the point of no labels. At some point, put aside everything else that we use to define ourselves, think about what's in the collective best interest of our nation, and come together to, aid that goal.
Yeah, I mean, the way you're talking is so refreshing, because when you turn on the TV, it's all polarization. It's pitting the two sides against each other. And you know what? It's stressful. I think you mentioned exhausting. You used a word.
Yeah.
I mean, I am, after the last election and then the aftermath, and then what's happened since, which you would think you would get a respite, right? You would think you'd have a break, but it's every day you wake up and you hear something, you read something, and you're like, man, I just want to go for a walk and just turn it off and, try to enjoy my life. But in the meantime, again, whether it's the grocery store or the gas pump or just all, or the fact that we can't have just nonstop immigration into the country without some kind of a system in place. And then we've got to worry now about our national security on top of it, which nobody really talks about. And so,
yeah, it's a scary world. Listen, whenever you see two people fighting, we have to start thinking to ourselves, who's making money off of this? Okay. Because
grift.
We are being used for short-term profit. And we're ripping our country apart. And by the way, I do believe that our enemies, our global enemies, aid and abet that. And I believe we, in many ways, are playing right into their hands. No labels gives Americans an opportunity to say enough. You have children, I have two sons. Sometimes I have to go in the basement and say, that's it. Yeah. I've had enough. Yeah. And that's where we're at with politicians and politics. We are the leaders. The citizens are the leaders. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we have to readjust our expectations of these people we send to represent us. We have to hold them more accountable, and we have to support them when they do tough things and take on tough positions and not hang them out to dry.
Yeah. Well, I'm listening, and I'm actually, my spirit is being lifted as I'm listening, because maybe there is some hope out there. Maybe for politically homeless types like me, maybe there'll be a home. Who knows? But it's not necessarily that I need to find a home. I think we need to find solutions to problems, as you said. And
exactly. But I think you feel politically homeless as I have, because the political alliances are shifting.
yes,
Everything is in flux. And my children, who get all their information from YouTube, have given me the horseshoe kind of concept, that the extremes are meeting at the bottom of the horseshoe and the rest of us are up on the curve. Some are to the left, some are to the right, but we can find our way together.
yeah,
The top of the horseshoe, we got to come together, because if not, the bottom is going to drive us right off the cliff, as we have seen time and time again.
yeah,
And so there is hope. Ultimately, we at No Labels know this is a great nation, and liberty and democracy are worth fighting for. They're worth being ridiculed online, as I have been, and everybody else. They're worth, all the pain that's coming with this stance. They're worth it. And we invite people to come on this journey with us, because we absolutely can make a difference.
yeah. Well, I'm going to throw this at you, and then we'll probably wrap this up shortly. But
Okay.
the other day, Senator Joe Manchin announced that he wasn't going to seek another term in the United States Senate. Some more cynical people said, well, he wasn't going to win his reelection bid, so this was a way for him to kind of gracefully bow out. Senator Manchin, along with former Governor, um, forget the
Larry
gentleman's name.
Hogan.
Uh, no, in New Hampshire, they met together for a meeting.
Oh, John Huntsman.
John Huntsman. Okay,
Yeah.
his name has been floated around as well. Brilliant guy, by the way, John
Yeah.
Huntsman. Whether you like his politics or not, he's got quite a story. And Senator Manchin, held the line a couple of times. Literally, he was the only guy who was pushing back against some of the things that his party was doing. Is Joe Manchin, is he been meeting with anybody privately? You probably can't tell me this, but everybody is speculating he might be the guy. He might be the guy who is on the top of the ticket, and if so, would that work for No Labels?
Well, let me say, first of all, I agree with you. Kristen Sinema is also very important, by the way, at holding the line. And
Sure.
anybody who goes into the grocery store and has sticker shock at the price of eggs and milk and basics, should thank both of them, because had the other spending package gotten through, inflation would be even worse. And that's what they said at the time. So I just want to make that, because they get brutally assaulted online and in the political marketplace all the time. But they played a very important role in trying to keep us on track. So that's that. I know this is really hard for people who are engaged in politics to really believe, but No Labels is not about any individual candidate. We welcome Joe Manchin's voice into the conversation. We look at it like he's auditioning for the part. Great, we love that.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't about any individual yet. This is about harnessing the collective voice of the common sense majority, getting ballot access, because that's our leverage. We don't have ballot access, they can go back to ignoring us. We have it, they got to pay attention. And then once we know what the traditional parties are going to do, we will then make an assessment if there's a path forward, and we will have a process that will get the best candidates. I think people will be surprised at the quality and the integrity and the hopefulness of who emerges from the No Labels process, because that's the type of people we're attracting into this conversation. People who are exhausted like you are, want to have hope, believe this country is worth the sacrifice that will require for running this way, which, by the way, it will be brutal. It will be brutal, especially if President Trump is the nominee of the Republicans. I mean, we just have to be ready for that. But, this is the time to stand up and be counted. You can look back over history and there were key moments when good people remained silent or stood up.
Mm-hmm.
This is the moment, and we can put this country on a different course. We can take our power back, but we have to come together to do it. So again, I hope you and anybody else that this message reaches comes, my email address is holly@nolabels.org. Email me, get involved. This is an act of civic imagination. I like to say civic imagination. Is it perfect? No, but I'd like to, anybody else has a better idea, let me know.
Well, on that note, I guess we'll conclude this. But Holly, it was great to talk to you. You gave out your email address. Anywhere else folks can go to get like all of the agenda that No Labels is putting out there? What's the best media coordinates where we can find that information?
Yeah, nolabels.org. Our website has all of the information. The policy summary that I mentioned is called the Common Sense Policy Handbook. That's downloadable online. And yes, we're looking for citizens everywhere to help bring more people into the conversation. It's an audacious idea, our strategy for 24, and it requires conversation, and it's best accepted when it's introduced by a trusting source. It says it's safe to look at it. Your eyes won't burn out of your head. So we just invite more people into this conversation with us.
All right, Holly Page, everyone. She is the national co-chair for No Labels, and thank you so much for being here, Holly.
Thank you.